You know how people say there are always signs that a house is haunted? Broken windows, overgrown gardens, and abandoned front doors are usually a dead giveaway. But the house at number 7 on my street wasn't like that. It was perfect. Immaculate, even. A little too perfect for a place where nobody seemed to live. The real horror didn't start until I discovered that the house was waiting for me. I moved into a quiet, residential neighborhood about a year ago. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other, and the streets were lined with identical houses. The yards were neatly trimmed, and families were always out walking their dogs or mowing their lawns. It felt like a postcard, and in the middle of all this was house number 7. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about the house. The paint on the walls was fresh, the lawn always seemed to be cut, and there was always a warm glow coming from the windows at night. I often noticed it from my window as I sat inside my own living room, watching the street below. It stood out not because it was run down or abandoned, but because it was too perfect. The kind of perfect that made you feel uncomfortable. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about the house made me feel like it was waiting. The neighbors didn't seem to know much about the house either. One day, I decided to ask Mr. Carter, who lived a few doors down. I had seen him around a lot, always busy with his garden or talking to the mailman. I figured he'd know everything about the neighborhood. "So, Mr. Carter," I said, making small talk as I helped him with his hedge trimming, "who lives in house number 7? He froze. His face went pale, his hand trembling slightly as he held the shears. "Number 7? He repeated. "There's no house 7 on this street." I looked at him confused. "What do you mean? It's right there." I pointed down the road at the house. He looked over his shoulder as if expecting someone to be listening. Then, with a nervous glance, he turned back to me. "There's no house 7. There's a dead end, and then just some old overgrown land. Past that, there's never been a house there." I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked again at the house. It was definitely there. Number 7, clearly visible above the front door. I excused myself from the conversation, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling that was starting to creep in. The next few days, I tried to pay attention to the house. I'd watch from my window and I noticed more strange things. The lights would flicker on in the middle of the night, and the curtains would always be drawn. I never saw anyone enter or leave. Not once. It was as if the house was in a state of suspended animation, perfectly maintained but uninhabited. One afternoon, I decided to check it out myself. Something about the mystery was eating at me. I walked over to the house and knocked on the door. At first, I didn't expect anyone to answer, but then a shadow moved behind the frosted glass, and the door creaked open slightly. A figure stood there, but I couldn't make out any details. Just a dark outline, a shape, something standing behind the glass. "Can I help you?" a voice asked, muffled through the door. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure why I was even there, but I managed to get the words out. I was just wondering, "Who lives here?" The voice didn't answer right away. Then after a long pause, it spoke again. Softer this time. "Come in, you're already the owner." Confused, I stepped back, feeling a sudden rush of panic. I looked down at the door, and there it was, number 7, in clear, bold numbers above the entrance. I didn't know why, but I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I turned and hurried back home, my heart racing. That night, I decided to investigate further. Something told me I needed to understand what was happening. I went to my mailbox and froze. There, among the usual letters and ads, was a letter with my name on it. It was addressed to me, and when I opened it, I was shocked to see that it came from house number 7. The letter was simple, just a single line. "Welcome to your new home." My hands shook as I read the words again. I hadn't purchased that house. No one had ever told me about it. And yet, my name was on the letter, as if it had been waiting for me. My heart started pounding harder, and I looked out my window, half expecting to see the house standing there watching me. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. I was obsessed with the idea of house number 7. I had to know what was happening. I drove past the house several times, but each time it seemed even more perfect than before. Not a single thing was out of place. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. There was something wrong. I don't know how I knew, but I had to go back to that house. I got dressed quickly, almost in a daze, and drove over there in the dead of night. When I arrived, the light in the living room was on, just like always. But this time, the door was slightly ajar. I didn't knock. I didn't think. I just walked in. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked through the foyer, past the living room where the light shone from the window. But no one was there. I made my way through the house, feeling a strange pull guiding me. It was as though I was being led deeper into the house. Then, I reached the stairs. At the top of the stairs, the door to a bedroom was cracked open. I stepped inside, and there on the wall was a framed picture. It was a picture of me. I was standing on the porch of house number 7, smiling. The frame read, "Welcome home, 2023. I froze. My hands trembled as I dropped the photo, stepping back. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know how my picture had ended up in that house. But as I looked around, I realized something even more terrifying. This wasn't just some weird coincidence. Somehow I was connected to that house, and it wasn't going to let me go. I ran out of there, slamming the door behind me. But even as I fled, I knew deep down that it was too late. The house had already claimed me. And now, every night, the light in the living room still shines, waiting for me to come back. And one day I'll have no choice but to return. There's a park near my house, or at least I thought it was. During the day, it's nothing more than an overgrown lot filled with trash. But at midnight, it transforms into something else entirely. Something I wasn't prepared for. And the most terrifying part? Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. I've lived in this neighborhood for as long as I can remember. The streets are quiet, the houses are close-knit, and everyone seems to know everyone else. It's the kind of place where you can walk down the street at night and feel safe. Or so I thought. There's a park at the end of our block that no one ever talks about. Not really, anyway. Sure, I'd heard kids mention it occasionally, but it was always described as a sort of abandoned, run-down lot that no one went near. One evening, as I was coming home from work, I noticed something strange. There was a flicker of movement behind the chain-link fence that surrounded the park. It was dark, and I assumed it was just some kids messing around, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The next night, I decided to investigate. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, but there was this nagging curiosity that I couldn't ignore. I walked over to the park, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. The kind of silence that seems too still, like the world itself is holding its breath. The park, at least during the day, was just a piece of forgotten land. It had no benches, no playground equipment, just overgrown weeds and a few old trees that seemed to have stopped growing years ago. But now, under the cover of night, something about it felt different. I pushed the gate open, and the rusty hinges creaked, sending a chill down my spine. As I stepped inside, the first thing that hit me was how much more alive the place felt. It was as though the air was thicker, charged with an energy I couldn't quite explain. I could barely see anything, but there were faint shapes moving, in the distance, just barely visible. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should leave. But something kept me there, something that told me I needed to see this through. I wandered deeper into the park, past the trees and tangled vines, until I saw them. The kids. But there was something wrong about them. Their clothes were old-fashioned, as if they'd stepped out of another time, and their faces, blank, no expressions, no emotion, just empty. I stood frozen for a moment, watching them play on swings that creaked with an unnatural sound, their movements jerky, almost mechanical. I don't know why I didn't leave right then. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the sheer strangeness of the situation, but I stayed. And as I did, I noticed something else that chilled me to the bone. The swings weren't the only thing moving. There were shadows, shapes that seemed to drift from one corner of the park to another, like they were trying to avoid being seen. I turned quickly, my heart racing, but when I looked back, they were gone. I should have left. I should have turned around and never looked back, but I didn't. Instead, I walked toward the playground equipment, the sound of the swings creaking louder now. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the park, half hidden in the shadows of a tree. I didn't recognize it at first. It was too dark, and it was standing so still, almost like it wasn't even real. But then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw it move. Slowly, deliberately. It was a woman, but she wasn't like anyone I had ever seen before. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were black, empty pits that seemed to swallow all the light around her. She smiled at me, and I froze, unable to move. "Do you want to play too?" she asked, her voice a low whisper that seemed to echo in my mind. I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to run, to scream, to get as far away from her as possible, but my legs wouldn't move. I stood there paralyzed as she took a step closer. "Stay," she said softly, and in that moment, I felt my feet leave the ground. I was being pulled toward her, as if some unseen force was dragging me closer, despite every fiber of my being screaming to escape. Before I knew it, I was standing right in front of her, and the children were gathered around me, their eyes fixed on me with an unsettling intensity. They weren't children anymore. They were something else, something older, more ancient. And that's when I realized the truth. The park wasn't just a place, it was a trap, and I had walked right into it. The woman smiled again, a twisted grin that stretched unnaturally wide. "Now you're one of us," she said, and before I could react, she touched my arm. It was cold, so cold, I felt like I had been dipped in ice. And in that instant, something changed in me. I could feel it. An emptiness inside, like I had lost a part of myself. The park around me began to shift. The trees seemed to grow taller, the air grew thicker, and the shadows lengthened, twisting into shapes that didn't belong. The children were no longer playing. They were watching me, their faces blank but expectant. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was like the park had claimed me, like it was part of me now, pulling me deeper into its grasp. I couldn't leave. I couldn't escape. And then, just like that, the park was gone. It was still there, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't real anymore. There was no turning back. The next time I stepped outside, I knew the truth. The park still existed, but only at midnight. And every time I looked at the empty lot during the day, I could feel it watching me, waiting for the moment when I would return. It never left me. And I'll never forget the faces of those children, or the woman with the black eyes who smiled like she knew my deepest fears. Now every night when the clock strikes midnight, I find myself walking toward that lot. I can't help it. It's calling me, pulling me back, and the moment I step onto the grounds, I know I'm home. There's a woman in my neighborhood who watches everyone. You've probably heard of someone like her, right? The old lady who sits by the window, always staring out, never moving. But here's the thing you don't expect. She's been dead for decades, and yet, every day I see her at the window smiling like she knows something I don't. When I first moved into this neighborhood, everything seemed perfectly normal. The houses were all neatly kept, the streets quiet, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. I thought it was the perfect place to settle down, peaceful, safe. The house I chose was small, but comfortable, with a nice little yard and a perfect view of the street. But there was one house at the end of the block that always caught my attention. It was an old house, one of the oldest in the neighborhood. The windows were always covered with thick curtains, and the garden was overgrown. It looked like one had lived there for years. At first, I thought nothing of it. Old houses in quiet neighborhoods tend to be abandoned, or maybe the owners were just too old to take care of it anymore. But I soon noticed something strange. Every time I walked past that house, I felt like I was being watched. It wasn't just a vague feeling of being observed. It was as if someone was staring directly at me. I turned to look, and there, in the upstairs window, I could just make out the figure of a woman. Her face was pale, her hair gray, and she was always sitting perfectly still, just staring out the window. I tried to brush it off as my imagination. I mean, people stare out their windows all the time, right? But there was something unsettling about her. She never seemed to move, not even to blink. It was as though she was frozen in time. A couple of weeks went by, and I started to get more and more curious about her. I asked around the neighborhood, but no one seemed to know much about the house or the woman who lived there. They all told me the same thing. "Oh, that's Mrs. Howard. She's been there forever. Don't mind her, she's harmless." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like she was always there, always watching, even when I wasn't paying attention. I started to notice her more and more, especially at night. Her figure would be there, in the window, even when it was dark outside. I tried to avoid looking at the house, but it was hard to ignore. One night, I was walking home after work when I looked up and saw her again. She was sitting in the window just like always, but this time, she was smiling. A small, almost imperceptible smile. But it was there. It was then that I realized something else. I had never seen her leave the house. In the months I had been living here, I hadn't seen her come out for groceries or walk around the neighborhood or even take out the trash. She just sat there, watching. I started to wonder how she was even alive, if she was alive at all. Was she just some kind of ghost? Or had she been dead for years and no one had noticed? I decided to investigate. The next day I walked up to the house hoping to find some answers. I stood in front of the gate staring at the old, faded house. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I wondered if maybe the house had been abandoned after all. I walked around to the back looking for any sign of life, but there was nothing. Not a single light on. Not a sound coming from inside. Just silence. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the attic window, just above the roof, there she was again. Mrs. Howard. But this time, she wasn't sitting still. She was standing, and she was waving at me. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I stood there staring up at her, and for a moment, I thought I had imagined it. But no, she was still there, waving. I quickly turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. What was going on? Who was she? Why was she watching me? The next few days were even stranger. Every time I walked past the house, she was there, always in the window, always watching. But now, I started to notice something else. As I walked, she would follow me with her eyes. No matter where I went, no matter how far down the street I walked, I could feel her gaze on me. It was like she was always there, always lurking just behind me. It wasn't long before I started to question my own sanity. Was I imagining things? Was I just getting paranoid? I tried to talk to a few of my neighbors about it, but they all just shrugged it off. "Mrs. Howard's been like that for years," they said. "She's harmless. Don't worry about her." But I couldn't stop worrying. One night after lying in bed, unable to sleep, I decided to do something I probably shouldn't have. I walked up to her house again, this time with a sense of purpose. I wanted answers. I needed to know what was going on. I stood in front of the window staring up at her, but she didn't seem to notice me at first. She was just sitting there, staring ahead, a blank expression on her face. But then slowly, she turned her head and locked eyes with me. I felt my blood run cold. And then, to my horror, she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile or even a normal one. It was twisted, unnatural. Her eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something. Something not human behind them. I turned and ran faster than I'd ever run in my life. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It had gotten worse, not better. I couldn't go anywhere without feeling like she was there just waiting for me. Her house, her window, they had become an obsession. And no matter how many times I tried to avoid it, I always ended up looking up at that damn window, seeing her there, watching me. A week later, I was talking to a neighbor when I mentioned Mrs. Howard again. This time the neighbor's face changed. His eyes widened and he leaned in close. "You don't know, do you?" he whispered. "Mrs. Howard died years ago. She was found in that house, sitting at the window, just like she always did. No one ever knew how she got there. But since then, she's never left. People say she still watches over the neighborhood waiting for someone to join her." I felt my stomach drop. All this time I had been seeing a ghost. Mrs. Howard had been dead for years, but her spirit still lingered in that house, still watching. I realized then that I had been trapped. She had been waiting for me just like she waited for everyone else who lived on this street. And now, I was a part of her story. To this day, I can't escape her gaze. Every time I pass that house, I see her at the window, smiling that twisted, ghostly smile. And I know that one day, when the time comes, I'll be the one sitting at that window, waiting for the next person to walk by. Have you ever thought about seeing your horror story on my channel? I want to hear your scary story. If you have a real horror experience, something that truly marked you, this is your chance to appear on my channel. How does it work? It's simple. Send me a message in the DM and I'll give you my email. You send your story there, and if I think it will impact the audience, I'll publish it on YouTube. Attention, I'm looking for real and intense stories. So, if you have something that really scared you, don't waste time and send it now. This could be your chance to share your story with a lot of people. Come join us.